The leather-bound journal sat abandoned on the corner table of Riverside Café, its pages slightly ruffled by the autumn breeze flowing through the open windows. Jackson Hayes noticed it immediately as he settled into his usual spot, the prime corner table he'd reserved every Thursday morning for the past 3 months. Even as the 34-year-old tech mogul worth billions, he preferred this quaint café in downtown Portland for its anonymity and exceptional coffee. "Your usual, mister. Hayes black Americano and avocado toast?" asked Mia, the barista who had long stopped being starstruck by his presence. "Perfect. Thanks," Jackson replied, his attention already drawn to the forgotten diary. Its worn burgundy cover and frayed ribbon bookmark suggested it was well used and likely treasured. After Mia walked away, he reached for it, telling himself he was just checking for identification to return it to its owner. The first page contained only a name written in elegant cursive: "Property of Abigail Bennett." The name struck him like a physical blow. Jackson's fingers trembled as he traced the familiar handwriting. Abigail Bennett. The woman he'd let slip away 12 years ago during his hungry climb to success. The one who had warned him that his ambition would eventually leave him wealthy, but hollow. Against his better judgment, Jackson flipped through the pages. This wasn't just any diary. It contained sketches, quotes, and daily reflections. His ethical compass wavered, but curiosity overpowered his reservations when he spotted his own name on a recent entry. October 7th, moved back to Portland after 10 years away. Spotted Jackson at Pioneer Square yesterday. He didn't see me, surrounded by his entourage. He's exactly as I imagined. Successful, powerful, untouchable. The boy who once promised me the moon now owns the rockets to get there. Some promises are better left broken. Jackson closed the diary, his heart pounding. Abigail was back in Portland. The same Abigail who had once been his college sweetheart, his first love, his would-be fiancée before he'd chosen his startup over their relationship. She'd been his moral compass, the voice of reason, the woman who saw beyond his potential to the flaws he tried to hide. "Here you go," Mia said, setting down his order and glancing at the diary. "Someone left that earlier. Pretty girl with auburn hair, said she might come back for it." Jackson nodded, trying to appear casual. "Auburn hair? Tall, with freckles across her nose? That's her. Comes in most mornings. Always orders a chai latte and writes in that diary." He thanked Mia with an overly generous tip and stared at the journal. The right thing would be to leave it with the staff. Instead, he opened it again, justifying his invasion of privacy as necessary reconnaissance. The entries chronicled Abigail's return to Portland after accepting a position as creative director at a local publishing house. She mentioned a recent breakup with someone named Daniel, described reconnecting with old friends, and repeatedly referenced a project called Phoenix that seemed important to her. What struck Jackson most were the undertones of lingering pain when she wrote about their past. In one entry, she'd written, "Success means different things to different people. For some, it's a bank account with many zeros. For others, it's waking up next to someone who makes your heart feel full." Jackson chose his definition. I chose mine. As he read further, guilt and regret washed over him. The entries revealed a woman who had moved forward with her life but carried scars from their relationship. Jackson had experienced tremendous success building his tech empire, but personal fulfillment had remained elusive. His last relationship had ended 6 months ago with familiar accusations about his emotional unavailability. A new entry caught his attention. Received an invitation to the Hammond Foundation Gala. Apparently, being creative director means schmoozing with Portland's elite. Not looking forward to playing dress-up in a room full of people who measure worth by net worth. At least the catering is supposed to be excellent. Jackson was a major donor to the Hammond Foundation and always attended their annual gala, scheduled for this Saturday. The universe was offering him a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The cafe door chimed and Jackson looked up instinctively, his breath caught in his throat. Abigail Bennett stood at the counter, more beautiful than his memories had preserved her. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and though 12 years had passed, he would have recognized her anywhere. She was speaking animatedly with the barista, likely asking about her missing diary. In a panic, Jackson slipped the journal into his briefcase. He wasn't ready to face her yet, not without a plan. He needed time to figure out what to say, how to approach her after all these years. Through the years of therapy he'd reluctantly attended at his sister's insistence, Jackson had come to recognize his pattern of controlling situations to avoid vulnerability. This was no different. Abigail turned, scanning the cafe. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and Jackson saw the flash of recognition followed by something harder to define, perhaps wariness or resolve. She started walking toward his table with determined steps. "Jackson Hayes," she said, her voice steadier than he felt, "of all the coffee shops in all of Portland." "Abby," he responded, the old nickname slipping out before he could stop it. "It's been a long time. It's Abigail now," she corrected him gently but firmly. "No one's called me Abby in years." She glanced at the table. "I left something here earlier. My journal. Have you seen it? The barista said someone at this table might have picked it up." Jackson's mind raced. The diary sat heavy in his briefcase, practically burning a hole through the expensive leather. He should return it, confess to his snooping, and apologize. Instead, he heard himself say, "I haven't seen it, but I'll keep an eye out. Are you back in Portland for good?" A flicker of disappointment crossed her face. "Yes, I moved back last month." She hesitated. "The journal is important to me. If you do see it, could you let Mia know? My contact information is inside." "Of course," he lied, hating himself for it. "It's good to see you, Abigail." She nodded curtly. "Take care, Jackson." As she walked away, Jackson made a decision. He wouldn't lose her again, not without at least trying to make amends. The diary had given him insight into her life, her thoughts, her pain that he had caused. This time would be different. "I won't lose you this time," he whispered to himself, already formulating a plan for the Hammond Foundation Gala. With the diary as his guide, he would find a way back into Abigail's life, even if it meant confronting the man he used to be. Jackson spent the next 2 days immersed in Abigail's diary, wrestling with guilt, yet unable to stop reading. Each entry revealed layers of the woman she'd become, resilient, thoughtful, and still carrying the creative spark he'd once admired. Her writings moved between professional challenges at the publishing house, reflections on past relationships, and occasional mentions of him that always left Jackson with a hollow feeling in his chest. Project Phoenix Update read one entry from last week. The board loved the concept, a series highlighting overlooked women in history who changed the world without recognition. First volume goes to print in spring. Dad would have been proud. Jackson remembered how close Abigail had been with her father, a history professor who'd passed away during their college years. That loss had been the first real test of their relationship, one he'd failed by prioritizing an investor meeting over being present for her grief. In his penthouse overlooking the city, Jackson paced as his assistant, Tara, ran through his schedule. "The Hammond Foundation confirmed your table for Saturday," she noted. "Standard 8 seats. Should I fill them with the usual business associates?" "No," Jackson replied quickly. "Just confirm my attendance. I'm going alone." Tara's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's unusual. You always network at these events." "Not this time." He hesitated. "Could you also find out which publishing house recently hired a creative director named Abigail Bennett?" "Monarch Publishing," Tara answered without checking her tablet. "They're the ones doing that Phoenix project everyone's talking about. Innovative concept, supposed to revolutionize historical biographies for young readers." Jackson stopped pacing. "How do you know that?" "It's my job to know what's happening in Portland's business community," she replied with a shrug. "Also, they're looking for investors. Want me to set up a meeting?" "Not yet," Jackson murmured, an idea forming. "But find out everything you can about Monarch Publishing. Financial status, leadership, current projects, especially anything related to Project Phoenix." By Friday evening, Jackson had a comprehensive report on Monarch Publishing. The company had creative vision, but financial struggles, making them ripe for investment or acquisition. Project Phoenix was Abigail's brainchild, her chance to create something meaningful after years of working at larger publishing houses in New York. The diary entries about the project revealed her passion. Phoenix isn't just about books, it's about reclaiming forgotten narratives. Every girl deserves to see that greatness doesn't require recognition to be meaningful. Dad always said, history remembers those who wrote it down, not necessarily those who made it. Jackson closed the diary, conflicted about his next steps. Part of him, The ruthless businessman who'd built Hayes Technologies into a multi-billion-dollar empire saw an opportunity to get close to Abigail through a business arrangement. Another part, perhaps the remnants of the idealistic college student she'd once loved, knew such manipulation would prove he hadn't changed at all. That night, Jackson dreamed of their last day together. They'd been in his cramped apartment near campus, Abigail surrounded by half-packed boxes. "This isn't about San Francisco, Jackson," she'd said, tears streaming down her face. "It's about priorities. You didn't even discuss it with me before accepting their offer." "It's the opportunity of a lifetime," he'd argued. "We can make long-distance work for a year, and then you can join me after graduation." "Like I'm some afterthought to your grand plan?" Her voice had cracked. "What about my fellowship offer here? What about us building a life together?" "I'm building that life. This is for us, for our future." She'd shaken her head. "No, this is for you. There's a difference." In the dream, unlike reality, Jackson followed when she walked out. In reality, he'd let his pride keep him rooted in place, convinced she'd eventually understand his ambition. By the time he'd realized his mistake, she'd blocked his number and moved away. Jackson woke up Saturday morning with a clearer sense of purpose than he'd felt in years. He would return the diary at the gala, confess to reading it, and accept whatever consequences came. He'd offer to invest in Project Phoenix without strings attached, not to win her back, but because he believed in her vision. The rest would be up to her. The gala was held at the Portland Art Museum, transformed for the evening into a glittering showcase of the city's wealthiest individuals. Jackson arrived intentionally late, scanning the crowd for Abigail. He spotted her near a display of auction items, stunning in a forest green gown that contrasted with her auburn hair. She was speaking with an older man Jackson recognized as Walter Kingsley, CEO of a rival tech company. As Jackson approached, he caught a fragment of their conversation. "Exclusive digital rights would guarantee wider distribution," Walter was saying. "Monarch needs the capital, and Kingsley Tech needs content for our new education platform." "The project isn't about maximizing profit," Abigail replied firmly. "These stories deserve to exist in physical form, accessible to everyone, not locked behind a digital paywall." "Admirable ideals," Walter said with a condescending smile, "but ideals don't pay printing costs." "Perhaps I could offer an alternative perspective," Jackson interrupted, extending his hand to Abigail. "It's good to see you again." Walter's expression soured. "Hayes didn't expect to see you without your usual entourage." "I'm full of surprises lately," Jackson replied before turning to Abigail. "Would you mind if we spoke privately for a moment? I have something that belongs to you." Curiosity overcame her initial wariness. "Excuse us, Mr. Kingsley. We can continue our discussion later." Jackson led her to a quieter corner of the museum. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, then immediately regretted the comment when her expression cooled. "What do you have that belongs to me, Jackson?" He removed the burgundy journal from his inner jacket pocket. "I should have returned this at the cafe. I'm sorry." Abigail's eyes widened as she took the diary. "You had it all along. Why would you lie about that?" "Because I recognized your name and—" "I read it," he admitted. "Not all of it, but enough to know I owe you an apology that's 12 years overdue." Her face flushed with anger. "You read my private thoughts without permission? That's—" She stopped, clutching the journal tightly. "That's exactly something the old Jackson would do. Take what he wanted without considering others." "You're right," he said quietly. "I haven't given you any reason to think I've changed, but I'd like the chance to prove that I have, or at least that I'm trying to. By eavesdropping on my business discussion? By what, swooping in to play hero against Kingsley?" Her voice trembled slightly. "I don't need saving, Jackson. My life isn't some story where the billionaire ex-boyfriend returns to fix everything. Project Phoenix deserves to exist the way you envision it," he said. "I'd like to help make that happen, no strings attached. Not to win you back or control the outcome, just because it's important work." Abigail studied him, skepticism evident in her expression. "Why should I believe you?" Jackson took a deep breath. October 15th entry. "You wrote that true change isn't about grand gestures but consistent actions that align with one's values. I can't undo the past, but I can show you who I am now through my actions. Starting with returning your diary and being honest about my mistakes." Surprise flickered across her features. "You really did read it?" "I did. And I understand if you never want to speak to me again. But if you're willing, I'd like to discuss how I can support Project Phoenix without interfering with your vision. A server passed with champagne, and Abigail took a glass, needing a moment to process. You know what's ironic? I've spent years telling myself I was completely over you. That if we ever crossed paths again, I'd feel nothing. And? Jackson asked, afraid of her answer. And I was wrong, she said softly. I feel everything: anger, disappointment, curiosity, and something else I'm not ready to name. Before Jackson could respond, Abigail's colleague approached, apologetically interrupting to mention an important potential donor who wanted to meet her. The moment was broken. We're not finished with this conversation, Abigail said, handing Jackson a business card. Monday, my office, 2 p.m. If you're serious about Project Phoenix, come prepared with ideas, not just money. She paused, then added more quietly, And Jackson? Don't read any more of my diary. As she walked away, Jackson felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope mixed with uncertainty. He had no control over this situation, no guaranteed outcome. For the first time in a long time, he would have to earn trust rather than buy it. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I won't lose you this time, he whispered to himself, tucking her card carefully into his pocket. But this time, the words felt less like a declaration of ownership and more like a promise to himself to be worthy of a second chance. Monday arrived with uncharacteristic Portland sunshine, as if the universe itself approved of new beginnings. Jackson arrived at Monarch Publishing's modest offices 15 minutes early, carrying a leather portfolio and no assistant, a deliberate choice to show Abigail he wasn't hiding behind his corporate persona. The receptionist directed him to a glass-walled conference room where Abigail was already waiting, dressed in a tailored navy blazer, her auburn hair pulled back in a professional knot. Beside her sat a bespectacled man in his 50s, who Jackson recognized from his research as Gregory Walsh, Monarch's founder and principal owner. Mr. Hayes, Gregory stood to shake his hand, enthusiasm evident. We're honored you reached out about Project Phoenix. Abigail speaks highly of your business acumen. Jackson glanced at Abigail, whose neutral expression revealed nothing. I'm intrigued by the concept, he replied carefully. Innovative educational content with social impact aligns with Hayes Technologies' community initiatives. For the next 30 minutes, Abigail outlined Project Phoenix in detail, a 12-volume series highlighting women whose contributions to science, politics, arts, and social justice had been overshadowed or erased by male counterparts. The presentation was polished and passionate, revealing how deeply she believed in the project. Our challenge, Gregory interjected, is balancing accessibility with sustainability. Traditional publishing models favor established names over innovative concepts. That's where I believe I can help. Jackson opened his portfolio. I've prepared 3 potential partnership structures that would preserve your creative control while providing the necessary capital. As they reviewed his proposals, Jackson noticed Abigail's surprise at his thorough understanding of publishing economics and his willingness to take a minimal equity position. When Gregory excused himself for another meeting, Jackson finally had a moment alone with her. You actually prepared real proposals, Abigail said, reviewing the documents again. I half expected you to show up with a blank check and expect gratitude. The old Jackson might have, he admitted. I've learned some lessons about respecting other people's expertise. She studied him, skepticism still evident. Why Project Phoenix? There are dozens of publishing startups that would give you better returns. Because it matters, he said simply. And because I know what it feels like to have a vision others can't yet see. Their conversation was interrupted when Gregory returned with unexpected company, Walter Kingsley, whose predatory smile made Jackson instantly wary. Hope you don't mind my joining, Walter said, taking a seat without invitation. Gregory mentioned you were here discussing Phoenix, and since we've been in negotiations ourselves, it seemed efficient to combine conversations. Gregory looked uncomfortable. Walter has made a compelling acquisition offer for Monarch. We haven't decided anything yet. Jackson noticed Abigail's hands tighten around her pen. This was clearly news to her. An acquisition would certainly solve your capital problems, Walter continued smoothly. And Hayes Technologies is primarily hardware and software, not content creation, different lanes entirely. The implication was clear. Back off. This is my territory. Jackson had faced enough corporate sharks to recognize the maneuver. Actually, Jackson countered, content and technology are increasingly converging. But unlike a full acquisition, my proposal allows Monarch to maintain its identity and creative direction. The tension in the room thickened as Walter outlined his competing offer, financially generous but requiring full integration into Kingsley Tech's digital education platform, effectively dismantling Monarch's independence and traditional publishing approach. When the meeting finally ended, Jackson felt the familiar rush of competitive energy, but it was tempered by concern over Abigail's unusually quiet demeanor. As they walked toward the elevator, he asked, "Are you okay?" "Gregory never mentioned Kingsley's acquisition offer," she replied, voice tight with controlled emotion. "He promised me creative control when I took this position." "Startup founders sometimes get desperate when cash runs low," Jackson said gently. "I've seen it happen. Hell, I almost sold my own company in year 3 when we hit unexpected development delays." The elevator arrived, and they stepped in together. "What stopped you?" she asked. "Remembering why I started in the first place," he answered. "It wasn't about the exit strategy. It was about building something meaningful." Abigail's shoulders slumped slightly. "Gregory talks about Phoenix being revolutionary. But maybe that was just to lure me from New York. Maybe it was always about setting up for acquisition." "For what it's worth," Jackson said as they reached the lobby, "I think your vision for Phoenix is exactly what the publishing world needs." "Coffee?" She hesitated, then nodded. "There's a place around the corner." At the small cafe, away from corporate politics, Abigail seemed to relax marginally. They found a quiet table by the window, and Jackson was struck by the parallel to their college days, when they'd spent countless hours in similar cafes, dreaming about changing the world. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said after they'd ordered. "That entry you quoted at the gala, about true change being consistent actions, not grand gestures. Why did that one stick with you?" Jackson considered his answer carefully. "Because it made me realize how often I've substituted money for genuine connection, donations instead of time, acquisitions instead of building relationships." He paused. "I've been efficient, but not meaningful." "And you want to be meaningful now?" The skepticism in her voice was tempered with genuine curiosity. "I want to try," he admitted, "starting with Project Phoenix." Their conversation shifted to the books themselves, and Jackson found himself genuinely engrossed in Abigail's vision for each volume. Her knowledge of these overlooked historical women was impressive, her passion contagious. "My father used to say history isn't what happened, but what gets remembered," she explained. These women deserve to be remembered properly. As they talked, Jackson's phone repeatedly buzzed with messages from Tara about urgent business matters. He silenced it without checking, a small action that didn't go unnoticed by Abigail. "The world won't collapse if Jackson Hayes takes an extended coffee break?" she asked with the hint of a smile. "Apparently not," he replied, returning her smile, "though my assistant might disagree." The moment of warmth between them was shattered when Abigail's own phone rang. Her expression darkened as she answered. "Gregory? Yes, I can come back now." She listened for a moment. "I understand. I'll be right there." She hung up, gathering her things quickly. "Emergency board meeting. Apparently Kingsley made a formal offer immediately after our meeting, significantly higher than his initial discussions. Gregory thinks we should take it." Jackson felt his chest tighten. "What about Phoenix?" "Kingsley says they'll still produce it, just exclusively on their digital platform." Her voice hardened. "Everything I've worked for, reduced to content for a subscription service." "Let me come with you," Jackson offered, standing. "I can make a counter-offer." "No," Abigail said firmly. "This isn't your battle, Jackson, and I won't have you swooping in with your billions to play hero." "That's not what—" "Isn't it?" she interrupted. "You've always needed to control situations, fix problems, be the smartest person in the room. Some things never change." Her words stung because they contained truth. "You're right about who I was," he acknowledged, "but this isn't about control. It's about believing in your vision." Abigail's expression softened slightly. "I need to handle this my way. If I'm going to fight for Phoenix, it has to be on my own terms." As she turned to leave, Jackson called after her, "Your diary. The entry about your father's book collection. You wrote that he left them to you because he trusted you to keep the stories alive. This is the same thing, Abigail. These women's stories deserve your advocacy." She paused, visibly surprised. You really did read every entry, didn't you? Not everyone, he admitted, but enough to know that Phoenix isn't just a project for you. It's a promise to your father, to yourself, and to all those forgotten women. Something shifted in her eyes, perhaps recognition that despite everything, Jackson truly understood what drove her. I have to go, she said, but her tone had lost its edge. As Jackson watched her walk away, he realized he'd reached a crossroads. He could respect her wishes and stay out of it, or he could do what the old Jackson would do, leverage his power and connections to outmaneuver Kingsley. One path might win her respect but lose Phoenix. The other might save Phoenix but lose any chance with Abigail. The choice he made next would reveal whether he had truly changed or merely wanted to appear that way. 3 days passed without word from Abigail. Jackson honored her request for space, though it tested his patience like nothing in recent memory. Tara noticed his distraction during meetings, his constant checking of emails, and the way he'd stare out his office windows toward downtown, where Monarch Publishing's offices stood. "Whatever's bothering you," she finally said on Thursday morning, "fix it or delegate it. You've built an empire by making decisions, not dwelling on them." Her words echoed in his mind as he sat alone in his penthouse that evening. On his coffee table lay 2 documents, a comprehensive acquisition proposal for Monarch Publishing that would outbid Kingsley Tech, and a simpler investment offer that would provide capital while leaving ownership intact. The first represented the old Jackson, decisive, controlling, effective. The second reflected who he aspired to be, respectful of others' autonomy, even at the cost of certainty. His contemplation was interrupted by his phone ringing, Abigail's name appearing on the screen. "I need to see you," she said without preamble when he answered. "Are you home?" 40 minutes later, Abigail stood in his living room, her usual composure noticeably fractured. She paced between his floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights creating a dramatic backdrop to her evident distress. "The board voted to accept Kingsley's offer," she announced. "Final papers will be signed Monday morning." Jackson kept his distance, sensing she needed space. "I'm sorry." "What about Phoenix?" "Reduced to digital-only content, released gradually over 3 years instead of my planned schedule." She stopped pacing to face him. "Kingsley personally informed me that my role would be advisory, essentially stripped of decision-making authority." Her bitter laugh held no humor. "He suggested I should be grateful they're keeping the project at all." "That's not right," Jackson said quietly. "Phoenix deserves better. You deserve better. That's actually why I'm here." Abigail took a deep breath. "I need your help, but I need it on my terms." Jackson gestured to the couch. "I'm listening." As they sat, Abigail explained her plan. She'd spent the past 3 days securing verbal commitments from key authors and illustrators who'd rather follow her than stay with a Kingsley-owned monarch. She'd approached smaller independent publishers about taking on Phoenix, but none had the capital to launch such an ambitious project, especially with Kingsley likely to create legal obstacles. "I want to start fresh," she concluded. "Create my own publishing house focused exclusively on underrepresented historical narratives, but I need a strategic investor who understands both the business and the mission." Jackson felt hope rising, but kept his expression neutral. "And you're asking me to be that investor?" "Yes, but with conditions." Her green eyes held his with unwavering intensity. "First, it's a true partnership. You provide capital and business expertise. I maintain complete creative control. Second, we establish a foundation that ensures these books reach public schools and libraries, regardless of their budget constraints. Third," she hesitated, vulnerability briefly replacing her business demeanor. "Third, we keep our personal history and potential future separate from this venture. Whatever happens between us, or doesn't happen, Phoenix continues." Jackson considered her terms carefully. "I agree to all 3 conditions, with one amendment to the third." When she tensed, he quickly added, "The amendment is only that we acknowledge our history exists. We don't ignore it or pretend it didn't shape us. But yes, the business stands independent of our personal relationship." Abigail visibly relaxed. "I can accept that. Then we have a deal." He offered his hand and she took it, a simple handshake that somehow felt more significant than any contract he'd ever signed. They spent the next hour outlining preliminary business structures, with Abigail revealing impressive knowledge of publishing economics, and Jackson contributing his expertise on sustainable growth models. As the conversation turned to potential office spaces, Abigail suddenly laughed. "What's funny?" Jackson asked. "Us. Here, planning a business together." She shook her head in wonder. If someone had told me 2 weeks ago that I'd be sitting in Jackson Hayes' penthouse plotting a new company with him, I'd have questioned their sanity. "Life has a strange way of circling back," he agreed with a smile. "Though I'd argue it's not a circle but a spiral. We return to similar points, but hopefully at different levels." "Poetic," she teased, then grew serious. "Why did you really keep my diary, Jackson?" "The truth." He considered deflecting but chose honesty instead. "Initially, because seeing your name was like seeing a ghost, and I wanted to understand who you'd become. But as I read it, I realized something I'd spent 12 years avoiding, how deeply I hurt you and how much I regretted the choices I made." "You broke my heart," she said softly. "Not because you chose your dream, but because you didn't see how your dream could include me." "I know that now," he acknowledged. "Success means nothing if you don't have people to share it with, people who challenge you, inspire you, make you better." They sat in contemplative silence until Abigail glanced at her watch. "It's late. I should go. We have a lot to accomplish before Monday if we're going to counter Kingsley's move." "Stay," Jackson said impulsively, then clarified when her eyebrows rose. "Not like that. I mean, I have 3 guest rooms. We could continue working, order dinner, plan our strategy. No pressure, no expectations." To his surprise, she agreed. "Let me get my laptop from the car." The weekend passed in a blur of productivity and rediscovery. They established a new publishing entity, Phoenix Rising Press, with Jackson providing initial funding and Abigail bringing her team and authors. They worked seamlessly together, each contributing their strengths without dominating the other. Between business discussions, they cautiously rebuilt their personal connection. Abigail shared stories of her years in New York, her failed engagement to a fellow editor who couldn't handle her ambition. Jackson opened up about his own relationship struggles, his sister's battle with cancer that had forced him to reevaluate his priorities, and his ongoing efforts to become more than just a successful businessman. By Sunday evening, they had a comprehensive business plan and legal framework ready for Monday morning. As they organized their final documents, Jackson noticed Abigail watching him with an unreadable expression. "What?" he asked. "I'm trying to reconcile the Jackson I knew with the man in front of me now," she admitted. "You've changed." "I've grown," he corrected gently. "The core is the same, just better calibrated." "Is that why you didn't try to outbid Kingsley behind my back? The old Jackson would have." He smiled ruefully. "I considered it. Had the papers drawn up and everything." He gestured to the documents still sitting on his coffee table. "But some victories aren't worth the cost." Abigail crossed the room and picked up both documents, examining them silently before meeting his gaze. "You chose respect over control. I chose you, your vision, your terms, your leadership," he said simply. "And whatever happens next, I'm proud of that choice." The next morning, they arrived together at Monarch's offices, where the board had gathered to finalize the Kingsley acquisition. The shock on Gregory's face when Abigail announced her resignation and counteroffer quickly gave way to calculation, as he realized the potential bidding war between 2 tech billionaires. Walter Kingsley was less composed, his carefully constructed deal threatening to unravel. "This is corporate sabotage," he accused Jackson. "You're only doing this because of some past relationship with her." "I'm doing this because Phoenix is revolutionary," Jackson replied calmly, "and because Abigail Bennett has the vision to make it successful. You saw a content acquisition. We see cultural impact." The board meeting extended for hours as both offers were evaluated. In the end, Monarch accepted Kingsley's acquisition offer, but with a crucial amendment. Project Phoenix would be spun off as an independent entity under Abigail's leadership, with first publication rights remaining with her new company. As they left the Monarch offices for the last time, Abigail turned to Jackson on the sidewalk. "We did it," she said, her smile radiant with triumph and something more. "You did it," he corrected her. "I just provided resources. Partners provide what the other needs," she replied, taking his hand. "I needed your resources. You needed my reminder that success isn't measured by acquisitions." Jackson intertwined his fingers with hers, feeling more complete than he had in 12 years. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Abigail said, reaching up to kiss him softly, "we build something meaningful together." As they walked toward their future, Jackson thought about the diary that had brought them back together. In its pages, he'd found not just Abigail's story, but the continuation of their own. A story of second chances, growth, and the courage to redefine success on their own terms. "I won't lose you this time," he'd promised. Looking at their joined hands and the spark of shared purpose between them, Jackson knew that this time would indeed be different. This time, they would write their story together.